Good afternoon and welcome to the Housing Opportunity Commission's Development and Finance Committee meeting for December 21st, 2023. I'm Commissioner Jeff Merkowitz. With me today virtually are Commissioner Rick Nelson and Commissioner Robin Solomon. And we also have a number of staff with us. The first order of business today is the approval of the previous Finance Development and Finance Committee meeting minutes from December 1st. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Is there a second?
So moved. Second.
Second. The motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The minutes have been approved. Thank you. On our agenda today, we have a couple of items related to West Side Shady Grove Building B. So I will turn it over to President Chelsea Andrews to kick us off.
Thank you, Mr. Committee Chair and members of the committee, the HOC team, as well as members of the public. Commissioners, this matter comes before you related to taking next steps to advance Building B, the opportunity that is directly across from our very successful laureate in Shady Grove. We will start with a presentation related to seeking support from this committee to advance the pre-development budget and initial funding, followed with amended site plan recommendation. I just want to share from our perspective, this is a win-win. It allows us to move forward with a really advantageous development, taking on the momentum that we've gained from the laureate, and also allows us to maximize our HPF to the best of our ability over the course of this next couple of months. So I'm going to turn it over to our real estate team, Zachary Marks, our Senior Executive Vice President, as well as Alex Lawrence, our Housing Acquisition Manager that's leading this project.
Thank you, President Andrews. For the record, Alex Loren, Housing Acquisition Manager. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So as Chelsea mentioned, we are seeking the support of Development and Finance Committee to secure authorization to go to commission for the preliminary development plan for Building B at West Side Shady Grove. This also includes authorization for President to execute a pre-development agreement with our development partner, the formation of ownership entities, and the assignment of contracts from the development partner to HOC, approval of the pre-development budget and initial funding, as well as the funding source for that pre-development budget. So the proposal of the Building B development is capitalizing on the success of West Side Shady Grove, including the Daily, which is operating at an occupancy of 96%, as well as the Laureate, which is a joint venture between HOC, EYA, and Bozzuto, which reached stabilization within 8 months and is now at 97% occupancy, which demonstrates a lot of the pent-up demand within this area. As you can see on your screens right now is the master plan for West Side Shady Grove. The Building B site is identified in yellow, and you can see the Daily plan north and the Laureate there as well. To the east, for those who are unfamiliar with the site, is immediately to the east is the access lane for the Shady Grove Metro and the access to the metro station itself. Next slide, please. So zooming in onto the Building B site plan itself, which is subject to site plan amendment approval, which we will discuss as the next subject on this agenda. But you can see the Building B site as it's currently configured is a modified figure 8 configuration with a limited podium construction, which is identified in blue here, which is constraining the lobby and amenity space, as well as the 7,000 square feet of ground floor retail. There's 3 courtyards, and then the 413 residential units are contained within the wood frame construction outside of that concrete podium. Next slide, please. This is the current development program for Building B. It includes a total of 413 units, 70% of which are market rate. Other 30% are affordable, with a division of 10% of those being workforce housing and another 20% being MPDUs at 50% AMI, and also potentially 30% AMI. Some important other items here to identify is currently over 21,000 square feet of amenity and lobby space that's contained within Building B, as well as the 7,000 square feet of retail space. These estimated project costs of $168.6 million, which we'll get into a little bit more depth in the continuance of this presentation. So in addition to capitalizing on the pent-up demand for this type of market rate and affordable housing in the area, Building B is being built in an established metro accessible area neighborhood with access to multimodal forms of transportation, including metro, bus, and access to I-95 and I-270, which includes access to major employment bases along the I-270 biotech corridor and access to other major employment centers in Rockville, Bethesda, and Fort Meade. The project team also includes reputable partners in EYA, who HOC has done business with in Westside Shady Grove on the Laureate. They bring long-standing investment in Westside Shady Grove in Montgomery County. They also offer low land basis, given their agreement with the county in this area. Another one of our partners is Pizzuto Management, who will be engaged for property management on this project. They are also on the Laureate. So in conjunction, we'll offer a lot of operational synergies and cost efficiencies across the two buildings. The opportunities of the project will also include the ability to build up to LEED standards, solar and universal design, which we'll continue to develop over the course of the design progress over the next year or so. A shovel-ready site with groundbreaking anticipated within 12 months. Proximity to the HOC Service Center that was just opened at the Laureate, which offers access to residents within the area, and then utilization of the HPF funds. Go down a couple slides, please. You can go down to page 10, please. Great, thank you. So EYA, the development partner on this project, has spent significant investments in public infrastructure across the Westside Shady Grove project, an allocation of which will be made to the Building B site, totaling $3.8 million. This includes costs for surrounding roadways, traffic signals, pedestrian infrastructure, utility work, and other offsite improvements installed over the past 5 to 10 years. And this $3.8 million at this junction will be left in as equity moving forward until closing. Next slide. The go-forward pre-development budget includes a total of $6.4 million for various costs, including design and engineering, legal, and permitting fees through the end of November of this year. This excludes the aforementioned $3.8 million in infrastructure costs, so it's all go forward. And it will include a reimbursement of EYA's costs spent to date since the execution of the LOI back in September, which is roughly about $300,000, which includes, if you're looking at the table here, from Q3 to Q4 of 2023, which is anticipating that pre-development services agreement gets signed in Q1 of 2024. It's also worth mentioning here that staff is proposing the PNC real estate line of credit be utilized to fund the $6.4 million in pre-development expenses, the interest of which will be paid at the contractual rate of the facility and included in the budget for repayment at closing. Next slide, please. So the current program for Building B includes market rate finishes for both market rate and affordable units, and ample amenity space as we've already discussed, including outdoor courtyards, pool, children's play area, club room, and state-of-the-art fitness facility. Parking is currently allocated at 1.2 spaces per unit, plus an additional space for 300 square feet of retail. But we'll be evaluating potential ways to potentially reduce that given its adjacent location to the metro.
Just a very quick correction there. It looks like on the chart, percentages next to workforce units and MPDU are off. So where it says 5% and 25%.
Oh, yes,
So,
you're right. That will be updated.
minor.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
It is worth
to hold over from the laureate.
Yeah. It is worth mentioning the rents that are currently underwritten at $284 per square foot here, which is based on a comp set that's been provided within the area. That is the net effective rents that the laureate are currently executing on. Additional comps we'll see later on in the package will demonstrate some of the other metro accessible sites here are executing at rents at that rate or above as well. Next slide, please. As mentioned, conceptual level budget at this time for the project is $168.6 million. The majority of that will be the construction contract, which is estimated at $100.5 million or $243,000 per unit. That's roughly in line, actually less than what was accomplished at the laureate, which was about $270,000 per unit, and which is indicative of the smaller concrete podium at the laureate. They had significantly more retail space, which required more concrete, a larger concrete podium, which affected that per unit price. So there are some cost efficiencies here by limiting the concrete podium to the limited retail space and the lobbies and amenities.
Is the HOC equity and sponsor equity, is that deferred developer fee or is that cash?
That is cash at the moment.
So the cash fee you're expecting is almost 6.5, or is some of it deferred?
The total, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Is the cash fee you expect almost 6.5?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. No, that's not deferred. Thank you.
Yep. It is worth again mentioning right now the estimated sources here are a private construction loan at 73% LTC, conservative interest rate based on what we've seen at other projects that are moving forward in construction, like the Hillendale right now, with the gap following that senior construction loan and equity sources being a request for $40.5 million in HPF funds at the moment. We will continue to put together a fully fledged financing plan with mortgage finance, which is anticipated to be presented to Development Finance Committee and Commission in the summer of 2024. With that in mind, we will evaluate potentially other financial vehicles such as LIHTC, which would include a deferred development fee.
So I assume you've at least preliminarily modeled the permanent financing. I'm just curious what you're thinking for the operating reserve and the reserve for replacement you're pre-funding per unit, and what you really think the cash fee will be, unless you think it will be 6.5.
So the reserves would be, they're not currently shown, but they would be consistent with what's been executed on projects like the Hillendale and the Laureate. I don't have those numbers currently, but I could send those afterwards.
It'd be great, I think, to see. I know things change and it's a long time between now and the summer, but obviously you've modeled permanent financing, just otherwise you wouldn't get into the deal. I'd find it helpful anyway, just to get a sense of what you think the permanent numbers would look like, sources and uses in summary, if that's not asking too much.
No, not at all. We can send that.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Speaking to the development timeline, some of the significant dates identified here, we're currently at the submission of site plan amendment, which is due to occur within mid of January 2024. Some of the other important dates are building permit submission, which is anticipated to occur this summer in July of 2024, before being issuing building permit, and anticipated loan closing GMP in November of 2024. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, these were some of the comps locations within the area that we were looking at. You go down one more slide, you can see the projects listed out themselves and the rents that have been executed on. Those that have a star next to them are walkable to the metro. So you can see the Laureate is at 284. I think they're most recently are operating at or executing at 285, and I think Avington Crown is actually executing at rents now above the Laureate, closer to 290. But you can see the units or the projects that have been delivered within the past 2-3 years are operating or executing on leases at those rates that are being included in our underwriting at the moment. Next slide, please. So we've mentioned some of the team members involved here, including EYA and the property management team of Bozzuto, but also want to touch on some of the design team members, including KTGY and VICA, who were the architect and engineer of record on the Laureate. So they have a good amount of experience within the area. And then also engaged as the landscape architect and interior design, that being Design Collective, and a pre-construction general contractor being CBG, who will be engaged throughout the design process to offer iterative pricing and feedback on the design. Next slide, please. Lastly, we just wanted to touch briefly on the partnership terms with EYA following the approval for LOI execution back in September. Just as a brief reminder, EYA acts as co-developer, taking on the primary project management role and completion guarantees, while HOC acts as managing member with general project oversight, financial guarantees, leasing protocol for restricted units, and the ability for tax abatement. Some changes have been made since the approval back in September. Those have been identified in blue and mostly include the awarding of construction management and asset management fees to HOC in addition to EYA, which was the original term. HOC would also receive 100% of any additional development fees in excess of the 5% total development fee that may be awarded as a result of LIHTC or other financial vehicles, if applicable. The structure of the payment has also been modified. It was originally included at LOI as 25% of the development fees to be paid out at finance closing, and 75% be paid out in equal parts to project completion. That's been modified to 25% at finance closing, 70% paid in equal installments through project completion, and 5% upon stabilization.
One question I had, and maybe it's too early, but that EYA could buy back in over a 3-year period. Did I read that right? Take an equity position. How does that work if you do a tax credit deal, assuming I read it properly?
It would, yeah. So it would be just for the market rate component. We would do a condo regime for the affordable.
So HOC would get 100% of, I get it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And then if they bought in on the market rate, would they share the operating guarantee on the market rate, or is it a different guarantee regime than on a tax credit transaction?
I believe they would.
Or you haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far. Are you just speaking about the market rates?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they would share in those, I believe.
Good. That's great. Thank you.
You can move to the summary page, please. In conclusion, staff is recommending to the Development and Finance Committee to join staff in recommending to the Commission authorization for the President, Executive Director, approval of the preliminary development plan that allows for further exploration of the proposed development, including design and financing of the vertical construction, approval of the pre-development budget of $6.4 million, of which an estimated $300,000 will be reimbursed to EYA for expenses spent to date. Approval to fund the pre-development expenditures as a loan by drawing on the PNC real estate line of credit. Authorization to execute the pre-development services agreement with EYA, along with authorization to execute all the related documents in the formation of ownership entities. At this time, I will take any other questions.
And the equity that's being put in, that would all get paid back at permanent loan closing, is that right? Or at the financing closing?
Believe in terms of long-term financing, I believe HOC and EYA would both keep equity within the deal.
The cash equity, okay.
Yes, yep.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? If not, is there a motion to support the staff's recommendations and send this item to the full commission?
So
Motion.
moved. Yeah,
Second.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
We have one more item on the agenda having to do with the site plan for Building B. President Andrews?
Yes, we'll just transition it back to Alex. Thank you.
Thank you, President Andrews. For the record, again, Alex Loren, Housing Acquisition Manager. So in this case, staff is seeking the support of Development and Finance Committee secure authorization from Commission to submit to the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission a site plan amendment in mid-January for Building B at Westside Shady Grove. Next slide, please. Just a brief reminder on the Building B opportunity that we just went over. The 413 total units, of which 70% will be market rate units, 30% would be affordable. This is based on the success of the Daily and the Laureate within the immediate area of a transit-oriented development, and as previously demonstrated, a lot of pent-up demand. Next slide, please. Go one more slide, please. So staff felt it was important to offer additional context on this request, given it is an amendment to an original site plan submission and approval that was not subject to commission approval. There is a history on Westside Shady Grove going back to 2013, but the most recent site plan approval for the Building B site was back in September of 2020. We'll get into that a little bit more in depth, but first wanted to highlight the entitlement timeline for Building B. You can see in what's highlighted currently is the submission of the site plan amendment, which is targeted for January 2024. Moving forward, we anticipate approval of that site plan amendment by April of 2024, building permit submission in July of 2024, and issuance of that building permit by November 2024, along with loan closing and GMP. Next slide, please. So we're looking at the master plan for Westside Shady Grove. Once again, you can see the Building B opportunity identified in yellow. As I mentioned, with regards to the previous site plan submission back in September of 2020, that allowed for EYA to build townhomes where the former multifamily Building C site located in red is. With that approval by MNC PPC, it allowed for the transfer of the density, some of the density from Building C to Building D. And while MNC PCC acknowledged the additional density to Building B at that time, they did not require that a site plan amendment be submitted at that time with the additional density, but requiring EYA and development partners to do so at a future date. Which brings us to today. Next slide, please. One more slide, please. So the current proposed site plan amendment primarily encapsulates the additional massing and elevation changes from the additional density, which is allowed for the project to go from a total of 343 units to 413 units. This has also allowed the project to increase its affordability from a total of 101 affordable units to 123 units. With this, the affordability unit or affordable units have gone from around 25% of all units to 30% of units. Some of the other changes that have been captured in this site plan amendment are design responses to planning department feedback, which EYA has been iteratively meeting with the planning department, including responses to their feedback, which has been signed off on by the planning department in anticipation of this site plan amendment submission. It's also included landscape, stormwater management design, fire access and utility connections, as well as the provision of an interim public use and residential amenity in the 7,000 square feet of ground floor retail. The Department of General Services, or DGS, has the right to locate a public library within that 7,000 square feet of retail, but Building B will deliver prior to the capital placement for a library there. So there is an ongoing discussion with DGS over an interim public use for that space. Next slide, please. The proposed site plan amendment, as mentioned, primarily focuses on the additional or the massing changes and elevation changes that have been the result of the additional density transferred from the Building C opportunity. As you can see in some of these elevations, what you're seeing, the lower elevation that is articulated in color and much more detail, is actually the original site plan submission. The pink background there is actually what's being submitted for the new massing and elevation size, which incorporates an additional story to account for the additional units that have been added. Next slide, please. This slide touches upon the increase in affordability in units. Previously, there was a total of 101 units, which has now been increased to 123 units with the additional density, and also just increasing affordability from 24% to 30% with HOC's involvement.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since the HOC policy has been against studios, why are we doing so many, and why do we have any in the affordable?
I was not aware of that policy, but we can go back to the design team and EYA to incorporate that feedback.
Yeah, just to sort of unpack that for a second. Yeah, I think in general, the commission has pushed for more one bedrooms. So I think part of this is taking over a project which is already site plan approved. But, you know, again, Alex can go back and ask the team if that's something that can be quickly modified, but to some extent it's the fact that it's site plan approved, and it's a little bit challenging to rework the unit mix inside the building because of where windows wind up and all that sort of thing. So, but let's make sure we just fully ask that question and see if there's a remedy here.
Absolutely.
You guys are up to all sorts of challenges. I'm not sure that, did the original site plan provide, I don't think it provided for any studios in the affordable, did it? And on the other point you made, Zach, the commission has clearly said they would prefer ones rather than studios.
Yes.
But I thought the commission actually took a policy position a number of years ago against studios in the affordable. And then further on that same subject, how many of these are MPDUs? Because if I'm not mistaken, MPDUs do not allow studios.
So currently the mix is 9 MPDU studios.
Isn't that prohibited? I mean, don't you have to have a 1 for a MPDU?
Commissioner Nelson, we will definitely go back and look at this further, but since we have you here and for the benefit of the full team, can you please share some background in regards to the complete opposition to studios versus trying to focus on larger units when we can, especially in circumstances where we are responding to what the market demand is demonstrating people would want. If you wouldn't mind just enlightening us. And of course, at the same time, we'll do our due diligence, pull out the policy that you referenced, as well as talk to our county peers in regards to the MPDU requirements.
To the extent that I recall all of the discussions, there was just general opposition to studios and the size of studios. There was discussion about the market responding to studios. There was also a question whether the developers were responding to the market or the market was responding to the developers in terms of studios, because obviously developers can make more on doing some studios. But that's where I think there was also some different discussion related to the affordable units, because in the affordable units, the feeling was expressed that most of our clients really have families and require more than a studio, and they did not think that it was appropriate for us to be putting our clients in studios, and they wanted to have ones.
And the position was, because I can see, of course, as we look at this mix in the, while there's an addition of studios, there obviously is also now the expansion to 3 bedrooms. I'm certain that was also a part of whatever considerations as well as the market. And so your recollection, Commissioner Nelson, was that there was a complete ban, for example, 0, or if we're able to demonstrate that it's in response to the market and in consideration of really expanding our footprint with these other sizes. You see there's more 2 bedrooms, more 3 bedrooms than previously anticipated, that there'd be consideration.
As I said, I thought that the commission had taken a firm position against studios in the affordable. I could be incorrect on that. They clearly expressed a preference for it. I also admit that that discussion was a number of years ago. It's been, let's see, I guess it was, I don't remember what, I do remember, I think Ralph Bennett was on the commission at that time. So maybe it was in the early 2000s. And things have changed. The question, when you say in response to market, are we, in terms of our affordable market, is there a demand for studios or is there an acceptance of studios?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely are seeing that, you know, of course, individuals on our waiting list, and even in how we were able to quickly lease up at many of our sites, that there's both studios and 1 bedrooms that people are looking for and need. You know, in this particular circumstance, it's a 2% of the entire unit mix here. And again, we will look back at both the MPDU requirements, but there are definitely individuals who are just, you know, single and in need of a space and aren't necessarily only interested if it's a 1 bedroom or not. And so
does our list give individuals the opportunity to request a studio? Or so I'm when you're saying we see the demand, I guess you know, I understand, I appreciate Rick's question about like whether it's that's what they want, or that's what they're willing to accept?
Okay. I think what I want to say is it's not necessarily demand from the waiting list. It's in regards to what we might see in terms of the market and what individuals who are renting in different areas, what the rental demands are looking like. And of course, in terms of, and again, we'll look at this closer as it pertains to this particular unit mix and the policy. But on our waiting list, when you enter the waiting list, what you put as your family size is often not what your family size is by the time you get called for the waiting list. So it's really difficult to determine. There are circumstances as well where individuals are going to studios because it falls, if they're using a voucher, it falls within their voucher payment standards, or they don't want to be rent burdened. But that's not just in our sites, that's across the county and elsewhere. Notwithstanding, we will definitely refresh ourselves on the policy, and if there is and have that information at the ready to update the commission at our board meeting, as well as talk to our partners if there needs to be a modification in this unit mix.
Let me just say that in terms of that discussion, and here's where it gets difficult when you talk about the demand, and I go back to the non-subsidized or non-affordable market rate units. I'm sure there a lot of the demand for studios on the market side is because rents in Montgomery County are so high that people will take the cheapest thing they can get to get a place to live. So that's not indicative of a preference for studio versus one bedroom. And when you get to the affordable side, we've structured rent so that, in fact, it's possibly and should be more affordable for people who require effectively a one bedroom to be able to get a one bedroom as opposed to a studio. So I think one has to be careful in looking at the two markets and the demand or the response. The other issue or question I have is, do we have any affordable studios in the Laureate?
I can check while we're talking.
Because I'm not, well, I don't know. I asked the question. Okay.
It doesn't look like it according to the chart.
Yeah, I don't think we do, and I'm fairly certain that was discussed when we had the unit mix.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And we did spend for the Laureate, we wound up spending a fairly significant amount of time and money, which is fine. But, you know, we did have to put a significant amount of time and money into redesigning the interior, because we were also, we were also trying to achieve the 3 bedrooms, which we introduced, and other things around that. So yeah, I think this is, I remember a lot of the same stuff that you do, Commissioner. I think a lot of it, I remember Commissioner Sally Roman being present for the discussion around those. I think a lot of it had to do with when we were looking at the Legates mix originally. So yes, definitely know that there's at minimum a very strong preference. We will confirm the MPDU, how the MPDU program treats studios, and certainly and we can also calculate what because clearly we have enough junior ones to switch the affordable 9 out, so we can talk about what the impact is economically, but certainly that's something that we can ultimately cure if you all decide that's the direction you want to go there. In terms of eliminating the studios altogether, I think we would recommend against that just in the interest of time, but certainly if the desire is to move them out of the affordable. I will say one quick other note about the value of studios in both the market and affordable is that, when we look at affordability, there's often an assumed household composition for each unit type, and the way in which these AMIs convert into the actual rents is usually assuming a household composition, which, for studios is actually small. It's a smaller household size than is assumed for the ones and the twos and the threes. So for instance, typically under the tax credit program, for instance, the assumption is that there are an average of three persons in a 2-bedroom. So there is still, that additional affordability. You're able to hit, deeper affordability with studios. I don't disagree that, there's a question of whether this is desire or need, and I think that's a fair comment. But I do think we do generally see studios as attractive because of their affordability. And so I just wanted to add that comment. I just wanted to add that comment around the fact that it also has to do with the assumed family composition size.
But I'm not. I think I hear you, and I hear you bringing in the issue about vouchers, but the vouchers are generally used in the private side. What we're talking about, what we had talked about within the commission, was when we build units, when we develop units, then we need to look at what size units we are in fact developing. And I guess the other piece that I would leave with you is that when the commission has those discussions, and I understand it's expensive to go back and replan and maybe even having to submit a revised site plan, but some of those concerns need to be considered more than evidently they were in this case up front. So you don't have to go through the re-engineering and redesign of some of these elements. That was the studios in the 3-bedrooms were very robust discussions among the commission over a considerable amount of time and a number of different commissioners. So that kind of thought needs to be absolutely discussed and thought out at the very early stages of development.
Yeah, agreed. And certainly the projects that you've seen us do from scratch, where we're there at the beginning, you don't see studios in those deals, I think, as just a general practice. So I think here it's just having to adopt this thing. The benefit is we can get in late and get it going quickly, but obviously there's a little bit of a, there's some of this is a little bit baked in, but we will definitely ask the questions about whether or not there's a quick and easy way to eliminate them. Certainly from an economics, it's just an economics choice on whether they're in the affordable at all. And so we can certainly confirm what that is.
Okay.
And we will include that information certainly in the commission packet if this goes forward.
Okay. You're going to talk about parking later? Alex?
It's not included later in the presentation. If I don't, we can talk about it now.
Well, okay. I mean, the reason I raised that is I'm not sure exactly where it is in the packet, but you talked about the comparison that we were doing, or the study we were doing in terms of utilization of parking and the parking ratio. That happened to be another issue that was vigorously discussed with the commission. And as I recall, we had the higher rate at the laureate than was desired by those who were on the commission at the time, but we accepted it because of some of the reasons you just cited, Zach. But the issue in terms of parking ratios has been one that I know for the last 5 years we've had a lot of discussion about. We've also found in our analyses, including evidently what you've just done, that the ratios in TODs is generally below, and the question is how much below 1-for-1. And so therefore there is a question of why do we start out with a plan that provides for more than 1-for-1 in a development that is steps away from the metro. And if we were to go back and, which you suggest in the packet, and reconsider and maybe redesign or reduce the number of parking spaces, what's the impact of that? Do you do additional residential units, or do you just lop off some construction? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's the latter.
Yeah, in this case, it would be the latter. The garage structure is separate from the residential structure.
Okay.
Yeah, and we will, we will continue to pursue that possibility. I think certainly we're very aligned there on trying to match the parking with the need. I think we're well above the, Alex, you told me the requirements earlier.
Yeah, it was the 1.2 per unit, and then the 1 per 300 square feet of retail space.
You mean that's what is actually is in the plan right now, but in terms of requirements, if you look at it, wasn't the recent changes made by the planning commission to almost get rid of parking requirements near metros?
Yeah, there's definitely the council just passed the bill within TOD. So, yep.
So it's not a question of what the minimum requirement is from the county's perspective. It's a question of what we think the best ratio is in terms of serving the people that we're going to house there, both market and affordable, and not wasting development money in building parking spaces that we don't need and won't use.
Yeah.
We definitely will go back to look at that. I will say, of course, while this is metro accessible, you can't walk to a grocery store. There are still some other aspects of other considerations, and we definitely don't want a scenario where people are not interested in leasing up because they don't feel like they can have the availability to park. But we will look at,
I'm absolutely in concurrence with that. And I'm just saying that from all the information that I have seen, all of the properties, ours and others, are parking under 1. And I hear your argument about you're going to have cars. I'm not asking for 0 parking. I think that's ridiculous. But I think that over 1 is overkill.
Okay, we'll look into that. Thank you.
We'll just move on to some of the other considerations that have been included in the site plan amendment. If we're going to move on to the next slide, please. So previously mentioned, and we think this is a pretty good win for our development team. In the original fire access plan that was included as a part of the site plan for Building B, and included a fire access lane that went from Columbus Ave, which you see Plan North, all the way down to the parking garage structure in Plan South. Through iterative conversations with the fire marshal, UIA has been able to reduce the length of that fire access road as a result of sprinklering the garage. From a net cost perspective, this should equal a reduction in cost and be a benefit to the project, not only because of the reduction of the road that would require an EV vehicle drive over it, but because of the impact on fire retention facilities along that facade and the ability to use that space for public use. That was the intention, was to use the east facade for a children's play area, which became impacted by that fire access lane. So overall, it's a net benefit to the project. Next slide, please. So while interior spaces are not subject to the site plan amendment, we wanted to provide an update on the initial space planning that we've been conducting with the development team, a lot of which we've already covered, including the 21,000 square feet of premium amenity space. Started to diagrammatically identify where those spaces may be within the lobby and amenity concrete podium. That will include conference areas, co-working, outdoor courtyards with a pool, fire pits, lounge areas, grilling stations, garden and landscaped areas, in addition to the 7,000 square feet of ground floor retail. In the next slide, you'll see some of those spaces that have been identified for the lobby and amenity spaces. You can move to the conclusion slide, please. In summary, staff is asking for Development and Finance Committee to join staff in recommending that the commission authorize developer EYA at HOC's direction to submit a site plan amendment for Westside Shady Grove B to MNC PPC. This will include a submission fee of $5,000 for a minor amendment, which is coming from the $6.4 million pre-development budget.
Jeff, how do you want to do this in light of Rick's thoughtful comments?
Well, I wanted to see, I guess if we want to make a motion, but, contingent on, staff coming back to us with, what I guess mainly it's about knowing whether there is what the existing policy is related to MPDUs, whether or not MPDU statute even permits studios, is what I heard Rick questioning also. But I think those are the issues, and I guess also just responding to the question about parking as well.
But also assuming the MPDU isn't a prohibition, is moving it to the market side, as Zach pointed out, that would have an economic impact. I don't know to what extent, but so it kind of cascades in theory.
Yeah, I mean, my recommendation would be, once we confirm the eligibility as an MPDU, obviously, if not, then we won't. And so we'll confirm that before the commission. And then either because of that or because the commission has the preference, we can move the 9 studios from affordable to market. But so I think that's certainly a viable decision. What we would not want to do is get into a major redesign, at this point, given that one of the benefits of getting into this deal is the way to move forward. We'll also, on the parking side, confirm that we don't have any baked in requirements from the actual entitlement. And if not, certainly agree to solve for the lowest practical number. Certainly having the laureate next door helps us to get a sense of what that operable number should be. And that's simply just we can just decide not to build the deck as big as, as we said, just sort of like leave a top floor off kind of thing. So so that I think are definitely things we would come back to you all with updates on, but we would certainly want to otherwise continue to move forward to get this started this year.
But did I hear you right, Zach, that you think the economic consequence, putting aside the MPDU requirement, that the economic consequence wouldn't be meaningful and that would work?
Yeah, without, Alex is kicking me under the table, but, so certainly want to give him the opportunity to run the numbers and present to you what that economic impact is. But my guess is it's not extraordinary.
So then the MPDU issue is academic then?
Right. And in the event you decide that there's a good reason to leave available MPDU studios, you all may decide that, but you may decide that no, save them all for the market rate runners. And so then in that case, it's academic. I agree.
Yes, one thing I just want to indicate is we don't want to lose affordability by trying to solve for the studio issue either. So in terms of number of units that are affordable. So this will require an exercise of determining how we can make this mix work. There was increased 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms added in this equation. And, there's always a plus and minus to making these different modifications. I would proffer that we move in a manner that maintains the percentage of affordable units that we look at and try to reduce the number of studios where we are able to, without negatively impacting the number of affordable units. We look at past resolutions to see if the board passed a resolution related to this particular policy. How was that memorialized? What in fact did that look like? Was that preference, conversation, and or was it actually a voted upon policy/resolution? So we will take all of those steps. We would appreciate the committee's support to advance, with the caveat that we will address those questions and concerns at the commission meeting on January 10th.
So would you, if we got rid of the MPD, if we got rid of the affordable studios, would we then increase the ones commensurately, or you really need to noodle on that, I guess? So, and I'm still new. I'm going to use that argument as long as I can, by the way.
Still feel new sometimes too, Rowan. So
Me too. I guess one thing I would say is, of course, the goal would be to do that, but at what consequence? Let's say we move them to the 1-bedroom, but then that means we have to take away a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. And so trying to reduce, we definitely want to maintain the larger units. We want to reduce the studios. If we're able to move them around and expand our 1-bedrooms, we should do that. And if there is not a complete prohibition and we can find the sweet space where we reduce the number of studios, maintain our large units, don't reduce our number of affordable, and still deliver on time and on track with this particular development, then that would be my recommendation.
And I hear you, Chelsea, that it's only 2%. Again, not dismissing what Rick said. Is it, again, I'm asking, not telling, is it worth you all going back, doing your homework and writing the development committee a note saying, here's where we think it would end up before we move to the full commission? Or Rick or Jeff, what do you think?
I mean, you've got a full commission meeting in when is it, in January?
January 10th.
My own view is, despite what I've said, to send it forward. However, with the caveat that the staff fully address one way or the other these issues that have been raised and give the full commission the opportunity to make their decision. Even if there had been a hard resolution, technically, the commission could change that. I mean, commission can make policy and they can unmake policy. But I do think that it's worthy of full consideration and fully understanding the reasons that the prior commissions had taken that position. And in terms of the cost and the work, I'm not sure I'd be willing to forego all this just because it saves a little bit of time. I have seen the work of the real estate division when they have been presented with these challenges from the commission to change things, and they do wonders. I am convinced between now and the 10th of January, the real estate division is going to come up with a solution to this that will be a win-win for everybody. And we'll still keep, and under no circumstance do you go below 30% in terms of the affordable units. And I'm convinced you'll be able to find a solution.
And regardless of the hard rules on MPDUs, I'm not sure anybody likes studios as a preference if you can avoid it.
Right. They do it for economic reasons.
Yeah, for all sorts of reasons. So,
right.
So I defer to you, Jeff and Rick, about whether you want a separate note to us or we just move to the full commission.
I'm comfortable with going forward, and I was sort of where Rick was stating. I mean, few things. One, I think I support the idea of not doing studios as much as possible, but I also agree that that was a past commission, and we don't necessarily have to be bound by it. But if that was the standing policy, we should know that, and without having had the opportunity to be asked to change that policy, we would want to know that. I mean, we can always be asked to make an exception. I agree with Rick that, under no circumstances should this go under 30% of units that maintain affordability. And, what I also wanted to say, and praise the staff for including a number of 30% affordable AMI units. And, I would not want to see that traded off, because I think those are critical, that we continue to add units at that level of affordability. But I do support the idea of moving this forward, and sort of, as Rick outlined, having the staff come back to us, having fully considered this issue, and posing some kind of solution.
So is what we're proposing, okay, tell me if I'm wrong, is the goal is to get rid of this affordable studios if possible? Is the first goal? It'd be nice to know what the NPDU rules are, but notwithstanding that, is the goal to see if we can keep affordability and zero out the affordable studios? Is that what we're asking staff to do as best they can?
Yes.
Yes.
So taking what Rick, you make the motion, since you know more about this than the rest of us.
Oh, wait a minute. The motion would be to move this issue, this staff recommendation forward to the commission for their consideration, with the caveat that the staff will address in the presentation to the commission the issues that we have discussed regarding studios in the
And maintaining affordability.
and how they will maintain. All right. Well, if they address the issue of studios, they have to tell us how they have maintained or not maintained affordability. I'm trying to make it not too complicated a motion. And related to your comment about sending a note to the committee, because of the short time frame, I'm not sure they've got that much time, but the sooner they can let the committee know, the better. But I'll leave that up to staff. I just think we ought to send it forward, just require that these issues that we have fully discussed be shared with and discussed with the full commission with a solution.
Second.
And
Motion
some
has been made.
wordsmith will put all that in form of a motion.
Motion has been
Second.
made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was our final item on the agenda. Are there any other items for discussion? Hearing none, before we adjourn, I just want to acknowledge, we acknowledged Rick's pending departure at the full commission meeting earlier this month. But he was gracious enough to continue serving on not one, but two committees for the remainder of this month before he leaves us. And I think, we have really seen in this meeting, just the value that Rick has brought to this commission, the historical knowledge and perspective, the values that he brings, the rigor that he expects. I have said it to him, and I'll say it again, that, I've learned a tremendous amount from his presence on the commission. And, Rick said to me that, well, there's no one that can't be replaced, but, the historical knowledge that will be departing with you and that departed with Jackie will not be replaced. So we will miss you, Rick, and thank you once again. Really have appreciated your knowledge and your friendship.
Ditto on that, and also Alex Sack and everyone around Alex Sack, thank you for all of this. It was great stuff.
Thank
Absolutely. With that, I will wish everyone a safe and happy holidays. And we will see you in 2024, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Holidays.
Happy holidays.